Thank you for joining us. Hello, Leonard.
Oh, hi there, Patrick.
See you on the screen.
It's been a couple of years, and sorry I can't be there today.
That's all right.
Hey, Leonard.
You're the exception to the no Zoom rule. One of them.
That's very kind of you.
This man sitting next to me. Every time we have a call, we always get to the point a minute late at the end of the call. So we're gonna meander. We didn't do much prep, but we have one prepared question, and we'll save that for last.
Sure.
All right. Introducing Simeon Schnapper, who is one of the most supportive and kind and caring and smart and well-networked, and I'll stop, but he's the dude.
Okay. Thank you.
Introduce
I'll
yourself.
introduce myself. I don't know if I've ever introduced myself, and Shane, great job, where the sentence was sucking dick for smack. But good comedy. Nonetheless, I'm Simeon. Good to see everybody. A lot of familiar faces. I have the great honor and privilege of being to collaborate with Leonard on a daily basis as one of our lead scientific advisor. That spans everything from drug discovery and development to regulatory policy to finance to science fiction to rare esoteric mystical cultures. The list goes on. But as we don't have any necessarily prepared questions, and wow, our time is up. It was great to see you all. Look at that.
Thanks
that
for
was
coming,
quick.
Leonard. Thanks, Simeon. See you guys.
It's been wonderful.
Yeah, it's great. Leonard again. Oh, look, they're resetting the clock. All right, just under 21 minutes. We can restart. All right, so to restart, let's talk about sucking dick for smack. And no, but in all seriousness, I've noticed there were a lot of time around questions. So we want to make sure as the clock ticks down, our illustrious audience is able to ask as many questions as possible.
Maybe we can start with the question, and then we'll just freestyle.
Let's do that.
Let's
do that.
When I first met Leonard, it was an email coming in, and he had just been, I believe, released. And I kind of, for the first 2 minutes, I was reading it. I was like, "Am I getting pranked? Is this real?" That was a really cool moment, being sort of touched base by Leonard, and he was reintegrating himself into the new psychedelic universe after kind of being put away for about 2 decades. So Leonard is clearly one of our forefathers, and he's now in the new age. So maybe, Leonard, we can start off with a curiosity about how it was in the 60s, how it is now, similarities and differences.
Well, goodness, in the 60s, there are probably few in the room that remember the 60s. Those that are over 70 might. The first large-scale deployments of LSD were done by, of course, Housley put out about 5 million doses, followed by Tim Scully and Nick Sand of the Brotherhood of Eternal Love, who did 2 kilograms, 50 million doses. Nick went on to do 13 kilos over his life. That's 260 million and more. But the street scene on the 60s was very different. We were all 21, 22, 23, that sort of thing. There were no cell phones, there were no computers, no way to communicate so easily as we do now. There were no elders, there were no people our age to discuss psychedelic phenomena with, even though millions of young people were undergoing the most astonishing transformative states. There was no one to talk to but ourselves, and only by arduous means. There was the establishment, the Vietnam War going on, the Nixon administration. It was just us, our community of several 100,000 or several million young people worldwide, the world capitals across the United States, South America, Paris, Rome. There was a fervent, in the course of the transformative states, of course, we all became more democratic, more appreciative of the great forests and the oceans. more delicate with each other. We felt as though we were a community of new minds, that we had powerful insights, precious insights that were unobtainable by our elders. And so there's a strong sense of community. With this, of course, there were the great love-ins and the be-ins and joints being passed, but spontaneous aggregations, the 20, 30, 40,000 people just walking peacefully in Golden Gate Park and music being played here and there. And of course, that led to the great rock concerts of the past decades. Music changed overnight quite profoundly. Writing, literature, the arts. We felt we were privileged to be part of a new generation. And then there was the great silence which occurred over the last 30 years or so when all research was suppressed, which to mention the word psychedelic would be a death sentence in academia. Laughable, fringe, not real. One hardly breathed the word. And of course, even among those that were using or experimenting, it was done very, very quietly and gently. There were no public statements of any of that sort of thing. So it's quite a remarkable event to walk into a world. And I've been free for about 3 years. It's just the most wonderful experience after that serious oppression, in my case at gunpoint with guard towers, to walk into a world where a new generation is feeling the same things, that we have a very precious event. We have precious sacraments, often forgotten in by the accountants of the great corporations, that these are not just curative drugs for depression, but sacramental, and they affect one's sense of compassion and altruism. The ineffable is affected. So it's a great privilege and delight and wonder, as this fine conference is named, that these precious days, the future, the next 5 and 10 years, in which you are the seminal figures, you present here now, are the seminal figures that will carry this next decade, this next 50 years, perhaps the transformation of our species through neurochemistry forward. So let's remember that as we talk together in these remaining days and hours, that we're all brothers and sisters of the spirit, with good science and rigorous science, and tolerance and acceptance of each other. And in that we have great power.
It's a powerful message. We are you see, there's a reason Leonard can zoom in. We are definitely experiencing in peak flight the cognitive renaissance right now. We've had the agricultural, we've had the industrial, and now it's time to work our way back to being humans. And a big part of that is being in relationship. So, Simeon, I hear you have a good story about how your relationship with Leonard started.
I don't know if it's a good story. It might be a great story. No, I reached out to Leonard 2.5 or so years ago. A lot of mutual connections, and we basically developed a bromance over 3 months on Zoom, and let's just talk, and we just kind of hit it off. And then Leonard invited me to Santa Fe. I remember booking a round-trip ticket. I'll come in for a night, take Leonard out to dinner, grill him on his book, which I read some time ago, The Rose. And I think I was there 2 weeks, and it was 16 hours a day. And we just went really deep, and Leonard was very generous with, sharing his stories and his knowledge. And then there was a few months of just getting to know each other and introducing him to, other members of the team. And then we were able to, engage him formally. So so much of that is really boring. Not boring for me, but okay, here's a company and they're raising money. Let's look at their patent. What kind of drugs are they making, or whatever that is. And that's been almost a daily bromance, or now the whole team, for over a couple of years. Since then, I've had the chance to travel. Currently, just in the U.S. Certainly with tact, and I'm just very excited what the next few years will provide as far as collaboration and really helping to solve these intractable diseases, really taking into account all the nuances of the space, the regulatory, the cultural zeitgeist, the law. I also have the benefit of traveling a lot, so we travel all across the globe. The zeitgeist in the Balkans is very different than the zeitgeist in Kentucky, although they're becoming very similar. The zeitgeist in Miami is very different than the zeitgeist in the Congo Basin. So we have the ability to get all these inputs and then make informed decisions. And Leonard's just been such a gift to do the analysis and really be thorough about it and have a ton of fun during the process. So I don't know if that was even a story, good or great, but that's just kind of what's unfolded.
A verbal meander.
Yes.
Which we enjoy. It's two very special Balkans sitting in the front here that I want to say hi to. Hi. So obviously, your fund, you have to be on the right side of the law.
Yes.
A lot of drug discovery, novel tech. A plethora of companies that you're investigating, and I'm sure you do due diligence tens or hundreds a month. How important is it, and what do you look to somebody like Leonard that's seen this for 7 decades since the emergence of it in the '60s? What is how do you bounce ideas off him, and what perspective are you looking for when doing that?
The framework we follow is one both in regards to prudence. So it's all, everyone's got a DEA license, it's a lot of research, we study all of the politics. We don't, because of the law right now, actually participate in anything that isn't fully compliant. Personally, I will, and love to help startups on the edge or in that grayscale space, if you will, because those same companies will be innovating what will be the solution. I think we were in Berlin a few months ago at a sister conference, and somebody asked us, what are you seeing on the clinical research side? What are you seeing on the drug discovery side? And it's really funny because every single trial we've analyzed, sponsored, or looking at could probably find that same thing on Arrowhead from a decade ago in some trip report. So now there's the classical and old ones, but this has been happening underground. And or even before the underground, this millennia of indigenous cultures and the protocols they've developed around the same medicines that may or may not be patented and backed by insurance. We're also seeing a bunch of new things that are still nuanced without a final determination. Like, do you need the trip? That's a big thing. We've tracked somewhere in the neighborhood of 800 to 900 million that's gone into this narrative of the trip is not important. How will that change what psychedelics are? Or I wouldn't even say psychedelics, I would say psychoplastogens, because that's medicalized speak, and it's something you get comfortable with when you're sitting with an attorney general or a president or a prime minister. It's those type of nuances that I think is new to what the next decade might be. But it's always good to know everything about the past, have a really key litmus test on the present, and then predict the future, which nobody knows. And the fact that even this conference has that, Venn diagram of longevity and psychedelics, like how much of that is going to be part of the narrative even, by next week. So it's still shifting and it's still really moving. I mean, the conversations and the dialogue we're having with politicians, global leaders, some of the largest foundations in the world are all in agreement that health is kind of important, and you can't have health without mental health. And that's the kind of the leading narrative around psychedelics is mental health, but we're doing a lot with Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, neurodegenerative diseases where, do you need the trip for that? I'm not sure. But if it's a vet who just came back from a war zone, how could the cathartic experience of reliving that in a different context not be really efficacious for the outcomes? I feel I'm now meandering again, so I will stop meandering.
I'll send Leonard on a meander now.
Okay.
So Leonard, when you look at the scientific landscape as it is right now, and you kind of hearken back to the '60s, how much of this scientific investigation or curiosity around just how far we can push our brains and really help people heal was there back then, or was it very just strictly focused on the underground recreational healing, good vibes, that kind of thing?
Well, the situation now, of course, has blossomed greatly. Of course, in the 60s, neuroscience did exist, and we had a limited understanding of synapses and neurons and that sort of thing. But the expansion of instant worldwide communication and access to the world's information at our fingertips among the scientific community worldwide in the last 15 years has brought brain science forward in tremendous leaps. The huge brain initiatives in America and Europe, for example, the advent of AI drug development applied to new targets, genomics, the evolution of what genes affect consciousness and the growth of the mind, the outcome of the brain. Science is accelerating. In the 60s, the journals were very few, no mention of psychedelics whatsoever. Occasional reports from a small hospital in the East, Spring Grove, what have you. It was death to publish a scientific paper. Now one can make one's career on it, of course. Young researchers and PhDs, MDs are encouraged to join the great psychedelic centers from UCSF to Hopkins to Yale, Texas, Michigan, Emory. So it's an excellent time for a young person to be involved in research. And in terms of the advancement of science, it's without precedent historically. Our ability to share information worldwide among scientists, and more scientists than ever before in the history of man. So the next few years, I would expect to see more knowledge about psychedelics than has ever existed, new knowledge. And in terms of the debate over hallucinatory versus non-hallucinatory, although as an old hippie, I would tend to feel that the long night of the soul may be necessary for cathartic experiences or reformulation of mental frameworks. It may not be so that hallucinatory experiences are necessary, at least in regards to depression and anxiety. But really, the bottom line is whatever works is acceptable. And those that are going to the great foray into taking the trip out of the trip, if that works more substantively than existing remedies and can pass FDA, so be it. We have a new medicine. Many blessings. One can take a pill at home, have no experience, wake up feeling undepressed. But many of us, if not most of us, don't think so. We think that the experiences that we've had personally are religious, almost magical, almost necessary, that one confronts deep issues, confronts the subconscious, confronts the eternal, theological involvement, just for a night. And from that grows a new mind, a new heart. So we shall see which way it goes. But the research will prove it out. And of course, the research must be absolutely rigorous, unbiased. It should tell the truth. Whatever the truth is, we're going to find out.
The truth is scary, but the truth is important.
Yes. Speaking of truth, we did at the top of this suggest we would allocate time for questions. So with 3.5 minutes left, according to the clock, are there any questions?
Do we have a mic runner? Any questions, raise your hand, and if we don't, I'll just give you mine.
Thank you. This is great. Yeah, a question about CRISPR technology in
Sure.
conjunction with psychedelics. Are you guys looking into that? And if so, what do you think's going to happen?
Yeah, quite extensively. Anything around CRISPR or editing the genome, the DNA, there's no doubt, whether you like it or not, and whatever the bioethical issues that arise around that it's not already a thing and will become increasingly more of a thing. In tandem with that, if you look at like when we started, which is about 4 years ago, just there's a narrative around what the deals look like, right? Early on, we could go back to the RTO days of Canada, and it was just someone would send you a deck with an Amanita on the cover and no business model, and somehow magically get funded. What we're starting to see now, certainly in the last quarter, is an uptick on CRISPR, brain-to-computer interface, and a whole bevy of things that sound like science fiction. They're kind of already here. So the answer to that is, yeah, we see a lot around CRISPR and gene editing, and the promise of that, I think, is astounding. We just have to be really careful, just as the promise on the longevity side around all the GLP-1 agonists and what that does and how does that affect things. So, yes.
Anyone else?
I can add to that, Patrick, a little, to Simeon's statement. We definitely look at genomics, particularly CRISPR. We've looked at firms that are using gene editing. For example, a recent paper in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Science was on gene editing of the 5H2A receptor, and that they found that particular editing caused a reduction in anxiety in mice. So we're seeing, and we anticipate, the use of CRISPR, particularly for changes in personality, changes in the learning and memory, the ability to retain information. So we expect that CRISPR will be used to advance our neurologies into areas and capacities, abilities that we can hardly anticipate.
Thanks, Leonard. I was wondering how, in this new scientific cognitive liberty world that we live in, how do we account for the immeasurable, the profound, the ineffable, the direct experience that psychedelics give you with God or whatever you want to call it? I don't like to say whatever you want to call it. I think God is a very good word for it, 3-letter word. But do you have any thoughts on that? How are we going to integrate it? Because right now in our culture, we live in a secular state, and religion is in this camp, and healthcare is in the other camp. But in your body, spirituality and healing are really one and the same, or a part of the same continuum as a process.
You want to go first, Simeon?
Sure, but I also want to be mindful of the, now the clock's going up, so we're over 15 seconds.
Yeah, we got like 2 minutes of
Oh, we got
buffer.
2 minutes. This is a very big question. If you study healthcare in general, or how people heal over the millennia, it shifts. If you look at just the word integrative medicine and how that's found its way into the parlance of healthcare today, that started about 27 years ago, and we're still not there. As far as the ineffable, don't know if I have an answer other than it's very ineffable. And how do we integrate the ineffable into a healthcare system that is anything but ineffable? Leonard.
Right. The question may be, speaking of the inevitable, and you're excellent observation of the two camps that are occurring on medicalization and the religious possibilities. FDA requires that a drug treat a disease. And so diseases of the spirit, the lack of ability to be tolerant, the lack of appreciation for the night sky, the lack of dignity and acceptance of each other. These are not in the DSM manual, and so FDA doesn't deal with it. And therefore, the corporate push to develop drugs and solicit investments hardly can be done for a drug that may produce an instant God realization, if you will. So, what to do in that regard? I think that we'll see many of the analogs that are being invented have these properties. They'll probably be more widely used in the underground, possibly among new churches that are being formed around ayahuasca and various derivatives. There'll be new churches formed on certain analogs as having profound and meaningful religious experience. So we're going to see a blossoming not only of the healing arts, psychiatric maladies, but a blossoming of very spiritual pathways, as occurred somewhat in the 60s with the acceptance of Hinduism and Vedanta and Buddhism subtly imposed upon Western Christianity. We'll see new spiritual traditions in line with the old.
I'm going to call for a big round of applause for this pioneer, this fine man.
Thank you, Leonard. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Simeon, and thank you, dear friends.